Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Aprina Mutmainah with set number 200201007. Today, I will re-explain and give you the resume or the summary of our subject, quantitative research method in language education. First, quantitative experimental and non-experimental. First is experimental. Experimental divided by two, quasi-experimental and true experimental. First, let's move to the quasi-experimental. The definition of quasi-experimental is the quasi-experimental design aims to establish a causal relationship between the independent and dependent variables. For example, you discover that a few of the physical therapists in the clinic have decided to try out the new therapy, while others who treat similar patients have chosen to stick with the normal protocol. You can use these pre-existing groups to study the symptom progression of the patient treated with the new therapy versus those receiving the standard course of treatment. Although the groups were not randomly assigned, if you properly account for any systematic differences between them, you can be reasonably confident any differences must arise from the treatment and not other confounding variables. There are three types of quasi-experimental designs. First is non-equivalent group design and regression discontinuity and natural experiment. In a non-equivalent group design, the researcher chooses pre-existing group that appear similar but only one of the group is treated. Regression discontinuity. Many of the potential treatments that researchers seek to study are designed around a fundamentally arbitrary cutoff, where those above a threshold receive treatment and those below do not. Closer to this threshold, the differences between the two groups are often so minimal as to be almost non-existent. And last, natural experiment. In both laboratory and field experiment, the researcher usually controls which group subjects are assigned to. In natural experiments, external or nature events or situations result in the random assign of subject into treatment groups. Let's move to true experimental. The definition: a real experimental research design is an experimental research design that examines the possible causes and effects between the treated group and the control group, and then compares the two. There are 7 steps in true experimental research steps. First is identify the research objective. Second is identify the independent and dependent variables. Third is define and group the population. Fourth is conduct pre-test. 5 is conduct the research. 6 conduct post-test. 7 is analyze the collected data. Okay, let's move to non-experimental, correlational and ex post facto. Correlational. The definition of correlational is research that aims to determine the relationship between variables or more without any attempt to influence. Then the data is valid because there is no variable manipulation. There is 4 characteristics of correlation research. First is this research suitable to be applied to variables that are difficult to study using experiments. Second, the study can show a high and low level of relationship between variables. Third, this research can allow researchers to test several different variables in the study at the time. Fourth is this research is useful for predicting or predicting a variable based on the independent variable. There is 6 steps in correlational research. First is problem determination. Second is literature study. Third is research methodology. Fourth is data collection. 5 is data analysis. And 6 is conclusion. Let's move to next, yaitu ex post facto. The definition of ex post facto, also known as after the fact research. Ex post facto designs are considered quasi-experimental because subjects are not randomly assigned. They are grouped based on certain characteristics or traits. There is 10 steps of ex post facto. The first is define the problem. Second is examine the literature. Next is that the hypothesis. 4 is list the assumption on which the assumptions are based and the procedure will be based. 5 is design the approach. 6 is select the appropriate topics and source materials. 7 is select or construct techniques to collect the data. 8 is establish categories to classify data that are unambiguous, appropriate for the purpose of the study, and capable of revealing significant similarities or relationships. 9 is validate data collection technique. 10 is describe, analyze, and interpret the findings in clear and precise terms. I think that's all from me. Thank you so much.